Welcome to the Wave tutorial. This video will discuss the basic features of Wave. So let's get started. We'll start out in Wave by loading a couple of files. We'll click on the load menu, go to bench tree, select MPU, and I'm going to load a directional drilling file. And so we'll browse to that. All right, and so once it's loaded, nothing will automatically come into the graphs. We actually have to select the channels that we want to display on our graphs, and we'll do that by clicking on this graph button towards the top left-hand side. That'll open up the Load Graph Data dialog box, and in there under Data Sources, you'll see Bench Tree, MPU, and it has the DARD file. And then you can select a couple of channels to plot on your graph, and so I'm going to go ahead and choose inclination, azimuth, and temperature, and then once you're done, you click exit. And so we'll also go ahead and plot files from a micropulse. So I'll go to Load, Erdos Miller, Micropulse, and then Survey. I'll choose my micropulse file. And then again, to load data into the graph, I'll need to click on the Load Data Graph button on the top left-hand side. Now under Data Sources, I also see Micropulse Survey, and I'll go ahead and add inclination and azimuth there as well. I'll go ahead and click Exit. And so now you can see in the graph, I've got bench trees, inclination, azimuth, and temperature displayed, as well as Micropulse's inclination and azimuth. Now, it's ideal to have temperature sit on a different axes than your inclination and azimuth. So to change that, we'll right-click on the plot icon shown in the legend. We'll go to Y scale and then choose axes 2. And so that'll move my graph or move my temperature data to a different axis. I can click on the graph tool towards the top right-hand side and select the option to zoom out on my data. This Micropulse file does have a few bad timestamps. That's why we see some data in 1999, but our region of interest is in 2019, so I'll zoom in, again, using the graph tools that I have. And so you can see that the green data here is my temperature, that axis is axis 2, axis 1 on the other hand is my inclination and azimuth. We can change the labels for our axes. To do that, we'll right click, select modify axes, and then type in our axes labels. So for axis 1 I'm going to do inclination azimuth, and then for my axis 2, it's going to be temperature. All right. We can also go in and change the title of our graph. The way to do that is you just double click on that title text and change it to whatever label you'd like. So I'll just change it to run 1, click OK. And so now we can see our data in our graph. We've got the right axes labels, the correct title for our graph, and then we can zoom in and analyze our data as needed with the zooming tools. All right, and so there's a couple of options as far as how to zoom in and out. So there's the zoom out option, which is on the bottom left-hand side. And again, that zooms out over all of your data. So if there's any bad timestamps, you'll see that as well. Then you'll want to either click on one of the top 3 zooming options. The first option on the top left-hand side lets you draw a square and zoom in that region. And so you can do that. The second option is to zoom in over the x-axis. So you'll click and drag over the x-axis that you want to zoom into. And then the third option in the top row is to zoom along the y-axis. So you can click and drag vertically and zoom into a section of your data. And again, to zoom out, you'll just click on the bottom left button and that'll zoom out. And so once you've, set up all of your graphs the way you want, set up all of the axes the way you want, you can export this data into a WAV file. And the advantage of using a WAV file is, say for instance, you want to share this data with a colleague. Instead of having them load every curve or every file into the graph and then zoom in and out and format that data, you can create a WAV file, give it to them, they'll open it up in WAV and see exactly what you saved. And so I'm going to go ahead and take this data that I have here, go to File, Save, and then choose WAV file. We'll name this Test, and then I'll click OK. And so if we look in the folder where I saved it, it's going to create a .wav file. And so if I close out of WAV and open it back up, I can go to File, Import, WAV file, choose that test WAV file that I created, and it'll go in and automatically grab all of my data, update my axes labels, my title, my legend, all that sort of stuff in one click. Now say for instance you're doing a similar analysis over and over again and loading in the same files and the same curve types. Instead of just creating a WAV file, you can create a template, and that way if you have other colleagues that are doing that same sort of analysis, instead of having to think about which curves to load in and how to load them in, you can create a template instead. And so with a template, when you share this template, someone can take your template, import based off that template, select the files that they want to pull in based on the dialog boxes that pop up, and it'll load the files in the same manner with different data. So in this scenario, if we go to File, File, Save, Template. I'll call this Test Temp, click OK. Now we'll close out of WAV again, and I'll show you what happens when we select that file. We'll go to File, Import, Template, choose the template file that we created, and so now it'll guide you through which files to load and then automatically plot them in WAV. And so I'll pull in a different bench tree file. And click OK. And then I'll pull in a different micropulse file. Click OK. And so you'll see that it loads in my files. I've got my axes set up correctly, and then all I need to do is zoom in to view my data. So you'll notice the temperature axes is set up correctly. The temperature, inclination, and azimuth are on the correct axes. And I don't really have to go through and load each file individually and then add the correct curves to my graph and that sort of thing. So it just streamlines the data loading and analysis. Thank you for watching the WAV tutorial. If you have any questions or feedback for us, let us know.